Hello everyone, my name is Vineet Mehta and we are going to be talking about flow hooks. If you guys have already seen my video about shared flows, we saw how we use shared flows to achieve reusability and promotion of best practices. Now think of flow hooks as one more way to use the same shared flows, in this case to achieve enforcements. If you are familiar with development in Edge, I'm sure you are familiar with this diagram as well. This is a typical processing of an API call within the context of Edge. Now what we have done is that we have introduced four flow hooks or the enforcement points to this processing of an API call for us to achieve enforcements and apply a set of business logic to each and every API call. Let's see a quick demo of how do we do that. Let's do a bit of a role play here and assume that I represent the security department of an enterprise. And all I'm doing is that I'm scanning through each and every API proxy deployed in production. Let's, for instance, pick Payments API and make a test API call to this production environment. As a security person, as I'm looking at this API call, I see that my API developers might have applied some basic security, which is fine, but I might want to enhance it and apply some enhanced security policies and maybe even some logging. All I want is a one-stop shop to enforce a certain security policies and logging to all API prols or all API proxies running in the production environment. The way to do that is to go under the Environments tab, and as you could see right next to our caches and KVMs, we now have a new option called as flow hooks. Now remember the diagram I showed you? These are the exact four enforcement points that were in that diagram. When I edit this, in this drop down, I see all the shared flows which are available for me to use. Now let's see what I want to do. I want to make sure that when an API call comes into production, each and every API call, irrespective of which proxy it is executing, must present a valid JWT token. Now before any API call goes and hits my backend servers, I want to make sure that I'm able to add certain headers and inject those headers into those API requests. Similarly, on the way back, when the response comes back from my backend might be producing some sensitive information which I want to hide even from my API team or my API developers. So I want to add a mask sensitive data shared flow or a set of policies to mask all those sensitive data. And before the response is sent back to the client, I want to do some logging. I don't know if my developers have done logging or have taken care of logging and analytics. So I want to enforce that to every API call. Let's go ahead and save this. And now let's go ahead and trace the exact same payment API. As expected, it executed one of our flow hooks where it was requiring a valid JWT and hence the call failed. Let's go ahead and pass it a valid JWT token. It is there in my history, so let's make this call. Alright, as expected, the call went successful, and now as we could see in this trace, we are able to see and inspect what happened into each and every of those enforcement points or the flow hooks. For example, in a pre-proxy flow hook, we validated a JWT token and then my proxy code executed. Similarly, in a pre-target flow hook, there was an enforcement which added the request headers. On the way back, it removed some sensitive data which my backend was providing. And finally, it did some logging in a post-proxy flow hook. What we just saw was that with a one-stop shop configuration, I'm able to enforce policies into my API call running in a particular environment. Now remember, I told you that these enforcement is not just for a particular proxy. It is for all the proxies deployed in an environment, in this case production. Let's trace this other API call in production and see what happens. As expected, the exact same enforcements. As we saw, using shared flows and hooking them to flow hooks, we are able to now achieve enforcements. I hope you guys like this feature. We have some great documentation. Check it out and let us know how you like it. Thank you.